Today we're joined by a true legend in journalism, Ivor Davis. His career has taken him inside some of the most shocking and iconic moments of modern history. From traveling on tour with the Beatles in 1964, to covering Robert Kennedy's assassination in the Ambassador Hotel, to writing the first ever book on the Manson murders, Five to Die. Ivor's reporting didn't just capture history, he lived it, often at great personal risk, even putting his own family into hiding when Squeaky Fromm threatened him. Also joining us today is Bob Wilson. He's a broadcaster and researcher who's interviewed Ivor multiple times and brings his own investigative depth into the story. Bob has a unique way of contextualizing Ivor's career, connecting the dots, like his research into Jolly West's strange connections to Manson's parole officer. Together, Bob and Ivor open up a conversation that is as fascinating as it is chilling. Ivor, Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you, gentlemen. Great to have you.
Same here.
Yeah, we really appreciate you guys taking the time to sit down and have this conversation with us, because I think it's important and also fascinating, really, the events, Ivor, that you've gone through and written about and experienced. I think this is going to be a treat for our audience to hear about a lot of these topics. So I think a lot of these different topics, actually, we could do just their own individual podcast for them. But so I'm gonna try to condense it to make it digestible for everybody. So starting, Ivor, I wanted to talk about this because this is one of the big things about your career, covering the Beatles in the 1964 tour. Can you give us some of the background behind the scenes with John, Paul, George, Ringo? What was that like in '64?
Well, it was remarkable because I must tell you what happened was I got a call from my editor in London, and he said, "Get on the plane to San Francisco in 3 hours. The boys are coming to America." And I said, "Who are the boys?" And he said, "John, Paul, George, and Ringo, silly." Because don't forget, back in 1964, we didn't have the internet. We just had newspapers, we had radio, and communication was primitive. Think of it, 64. So
Right.
Anyway, I get on the plane, because I'm in Southern California. I get on the plane, I go to San Francisco, and the scene that meets me is sheer, unadulterated bedlam. And I think, what the heck have I got involved in? And anyway, I go to the hotel, the San Francisco Hilton Hotel, and I fight my way through about 300 girls outside, and I say, I would like a room for tonight. And they say, we're full up. I said, I'm with the Beatles. And they say, go right in. I go and I meet Derek Taylor, the publicist for the Beatles. He introduces me to the Beatles, who couldn't give a flying you-know-what because they're jet lagged. They've just got in. All they are watching on television themselves arrive at the airport. From then on, the ice was broken. They knew I was not there to get them, and it welcomed me to the hotel, to the tour. I was in limousine number 2. They were in limousine number 1. We went through 35 cities like royalty with police escorts. I mean, a young reporter like me getting thrown into this craziness. Well, it was unbelievable, and I can never really duplicate that.
I mean, that's incredible. Just the experience. If that was the only thing you ever did in your life,
Yeah.
but it's not. But
No.
Anyway, you got to tell me, because yes, okay. So did you go with them to the Ed Sullivan show?
No, you've got to, let me give you the timeline.
Okay.
The Beatles came in February '64 to go on the Ed Sullivan show with Brian Epstein, their manager. Brian Epstein was a very clever guy. Brian Epstein knew that he had to get the Beatles known in America. So he went over in '64 and he said, I've got a bunch of guys that I'd like you to put on the show. And they put them on the Ed Sullivan show. The Beatles were a great success. Soon as Brian Epstein, their manager, realized that 74 million people had tuned into the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan show, He said, I'm going to strike while the iron is hot, and I'm going to bring my boys 6 months later to the tour, which I went on beginning in August 64. So just to avoid confusion, February 64, Ed Sullivan, the country was agog with Beatles. 5 months later, we're on the road with the Beatles, conquering America with the Beatles.
Wow.
Yeah, and I wanted to. So I was reading a little bit about you as well. I think you were doing some ghost writing for George as well, with I think a column that he was putting
Yeah,
out.
you're absolutely right. Part of my assignment for the London Daily Express, which was a large newspaper in England, when those were the days. Can you remember Paul Jr.? Maybe not. You can't. I mean, Pastor Paul remembers when people read newspapers.
I
Remember?
I remember those days. Those
You
are
used
good.
to hold it up and open it and read it.
Good old.
Anyway, so it was a big newspaper, and they said to me, write George's column for him. And so I wrote George's column for him on the whole trip. It was a bit of a difficult journey, because Paul was the quiet Beatle.
Really?
Yeah.
He was, because he was the lead singer most of the time.
Well, no. Let me correct you if I may.
John, of course.
John and Paul were the lead singer. George Harrison used to complain years later, I was a member of the Beatles group, and sometimes they let me sing. So that gives you the mindset of Paul,
And
of George Harrison at the time.
Wow.
And it was a smash hit, and the rest is history.
Wow.
Well, so I wanted to ask just a little bit more about that. So then, so you got to know these gentlemen pretty well then, if you're traveling through 35 cities with them.
Well, I mean, that's the amazing thing. If you went out with, I don't know, think of the big singers today. I mean, I follow some of them. What's her name now? What are the big singers? I mean, let's say you went out with Swift, Miss Swift. You couldn't get the access to them that I got to the Beatles.
Right.
It just didn't exist. It didn't exist. But things didn't exist 40 or 50 years ago that exist today, and it's a whole different ballgame.
Right. Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Almost Famous, where they had the Rolling Stones columnist in there. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Great book. They made a great movie about it. I can't remember, Paul, if you remember who wrote that book, Almost Famous, but it was it was exactly like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Cameron Crowe.
Cameron Crowe. Yes. Yeah.
Cameron Crowe. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, besides the Beatles, besides
the Beatles, yeah.
I don't even know how you segue out of that. But you were present, of course. All right, let's go this. 1963, President John F. Kennedy is assassinated. Of course, that is before the Beatles' arrival.
Correct.
But in 68, there's the riots, Democratic National Convention in Chicago. There's the assassination of Martin Luther King.
Yes.
And then, of course, there's the absolutely Robert Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy has just won the California primary and is going to be the nominee for the Democrats. You're there at the Ambassador Hotel. Tell us where you were at and give us the context of what was happening that night.
Well, that night, the day before, we traveled with Bobby Kennedy all the way down California to Los Angeles. And as you pointed out, Bobby Kennedy was battling against a fellow Democrat called Senator Eugene McCarthy. Mm-hmm. And Bobby knew that if he won California, he would be the candidate for president, and Eugene McCarthy had to drop out. That's what happened. And so we traveled with Bobby on the train throughout California. We got to LA. Bobby is exhausted. The night that Bobby wins victory, we go to the Ambassador Hotel. It's jam-packed. It's crazy. Bobby says, onward to Chicago, where the convention is going to be, where they're going to nominate him. He's going to run for president. And he starts to walk through the ballroom into the kitchen to have a press conference, an official press conference. We follow him like 10 yards behind. Suddenly, I hear balloons popping. Bang, 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 bang. But you know what? It wasn't balloons popping. It was gunfire. So I
Wow.
pushed my way into the kitchen and saw Bobby lying there bleeding.
Yeah.
Ethel is standing there saying, screaming, give him air, give him air. And Bobby was bleeding on the floor, and under a pile of bodies nearby, there's one guy, and it turns out it's a guy called Sirhan. He was the assassin. Now, there's a, so we go to the hospital, and we're at the hospital until 4 o'clock in the morning. And then Tom Mankiewicz, I think it is, his press guy, comes out and says, Senator Kennedy is dead. You don't forget those things, you know.
Well, of course, there's conspiracies there.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Bob,
I mean, look, I mean, you probably know more, and I know that our friend listening in without his picture
Bob,
knows all about conspiracy. So we could go into that, but then that would take us into a dark and distant forest. And
well, let me ask you, without being because there are sworn testimonies and affidavits of
yes,
people who said they saw a man behind Bobby
yes,
who may have shot Bobby from the back.
yeah, okay.
Did you see anyone else? Did you
Well,
see?
I tell you what happened. I found some old film footage, and I wish I could show it to you. I've got it on the wall. And then there were so many, you've got to realize there were so many wild rumors floating around. There were rumors about, there was another gunman. There was a lady in a polka dot dress. Well, I want to tell you, and then she disappeared. I want to tell you, I watched some old film footage, and I actually printed it out a few months ago. I found it on grainy footage. And there is a lady in a polka dot dress, and I'm talking to her. But everybody said she did the dirty deed and disappeared. She didn't, because there's a picture of me talking to the lady in the polka dot dress. But
Wow.
again, I don't want to go on too long.
Important.
And we can all come up with the John Kennedy, the Bobby Kennedy, the John Lennon murder. I mean,
Right.
speculate to your heart's content. I know what I saw, and that's what I'm going to stick to.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Well, that's important that you're able to confirm that you talked to the lady in the polka dot dress.
I did.
She didn't do that.
She didn't, because they said they told me the night of the thing, they said there was a lady in a polka dot dress who suddenly disappeared. Well, after the shooting, I had pictures of me talking to the lady in the polka dot dress. So she was, I mean, when you see a traffic accident, I'll ask you this. When 6 people see a traffic accident, do you get precisely the same vision of what took place?
No, not
No.
even, a lot of times, not even close. Sometimes 1 out of the 6 will think there's 3 cars instead of 2. I mean,
That's right. You're right. Yeah.
Right. Bob, what about you? I mean,
May I interject without taking us down too deep a trail?
well, that's why I wanted to hear Bob Wilson.
You can time me off at 90 seconds. Behind Bobby Kennedy was a security guard for A Security who was put on the detail that day named Thane Eugene Caesar. And he had owned a 22, which was what I believe they were saying Bobby was killed with from memory. Sirhan had an Ivor Johnson 8-shot. Thane Eugene Caesar was behind Bobby Kennedy. Now, one of the CBS newsmen ran outside. I'm not contradicting Ivor, he was 20 feet away and he was there. So please, I'm coming from a humble point of view. But Thane Eugene Caesar was behind Bobby. The CBS newsman who was off duty ran outside. The crew knew him. They grabbed him for his perception. He said one of our guys shot back. So when Thomas Noguchi did the autopsy, Bobby Kennedy, he ruled and got in trouble for it because he wouldn't change his story, that he was shot from 2 inches or so behind Bobby in the back of his head. Carl Euchre, who was the maitre d' who was leading, grabbing Sirhan's hand at one point and, helping pull him down, said he never was in a position to shoot Bobby from behind. Bobby's son believes that Thane Eugene Caesar shot him, and he would have been in the place to shoot him from 2 inches from behind where nobody can put Sirhan closer than several feet. So things do happen quickly, but the polka dot dress lady, there was 2. One was Valerie Schulte, and she was a blonde with a broken foot, and they tried to say she was the polka dot dress lady. The other lady was of Mediterranean descent with very dark hair. So I wouldn't call her a shooter, even from a researcher's point of view. But of course, I see to my good friend who is actually there in all these places. So I just pop in with that if anybody out there wants to investigate it.
Sure, absolutely. I think that's important to consider all the angles, especially. I don't want to get so far into the Charlie Kirk assassination, but with that, you can see now the current media coverage. Things are even more messy, I feel like, than before back in the 60s with the new AI generation, and everybody has a take, everybody has a voice, which I think is important, but I also think there's a lot that can get confused in there. I don't know if maybe some of it's by design. But Ivor, I wanted to ask though, because I'm trying to figure out who were you working for publication to get you in position to get on the road with the Beatles and then to be covering Robert Kennedy at the time that this was happening.
I was the one and only bureau chief on the west coast of America for the London Daily Express. And as I mentioned, the London Daily Express had 4.2 million readers a day, and they were a powerful newspaper. And so when there was a big story on the west coast, being bureau chief, I was assigned to all these stories, and that's how I got to do them. And I, you don't appreciate life. For those of us who are older, you don't appreciate the incredible life you're living until years later. I always say, I mean, I hate to use this silly expression, because when I talk to colleges and to kids and to high school kids, which I like to do, they say to me, when you were with the Beatles, Ivor, why do you only have one or two pictures? Why didn't you take your iPhone camera with you? And then I have to gently explain it wasn't invented. So I mean that's really kind of a convoluted answer, so I apologize for that.
I mean, so you're right about the fact that when you're living in that moment,
Yes.
and even though it is a big deal, you can see it's a big deal. You don't realize historically what it's going to mean historically. Then
I mean, do any of you, Pastor Paul Jr., do you, I mean, think of your own lives. You tell me when historical things have happened, you don't, and you're younger and you're immature and you're youthful. You don't stop and say, hey, I've just seen history.
Right. Yeah, I don't even. My wife gets upset because I don't even like to stop and take pictures.
Well, there you go.
Like, I just want to enjoy it. I don't want to take a picture of it. That's not part of the enjoyment process.
Yeah.
But one day, if you live long enough, you'll want to go back and enjoy it.
I mean, I wish you could. If you could provide a time machine, I'd like to go back to certain situations. I'd like to have taken my iPhone to shoot pictures of the Beatles. I'd like to have done so much stuff, because in my career, I've interviewed a lot of movie stars and people like that. And I never thought, in 90% of the time, I never took pictures, because in those days, they didn't have selfies. And in those days, you were a professional journalist, and you didn't sit down with Pastor Paul afterwards and say, let's do a couple of pictures. You didn't do that.
Yeah.
It was unprofessional.
Right. Wow. You're right. Now everybody's got to get a selfie with everybody.
That's right.
So yeah.
They got to bring the receipts with them.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we've only touched part of what we kind of wanted to talk about already. And again, it is hard to do segues and transitions, but I wanted to ask you, because again, you're I don't know if you would say privileged enough, but I think it's a fascinating road of journalism that you've experienced. But you were actually, I don't want to get it wrong, so I'll ask you where you were at, but I wanted to talk about the writing of your book, Five to Die, which was the first book on the Manson murders case.
I wish I knew then what I know now. And that's my alibi because being a foreign correspondent bureau chief, I got a call from my editor in London. He said something terrible has happened in Beverly Hills, and he gave me the address, Cielo Drive. So I jumped in the car and raced over to Cielo Drive. When I got to Cielo Drive, there were television cameras there, and there were some reporters there, and we were all standing outside the door, the gate to Cielo Drive house. And I knew something horrible had happened because there were a lot of cops around and they were keeping us out. And this is such a fluke because we didn't know who had been murdered, okay? And by pure chance, Phil Freed, who is 90 years of age, and I went to his birthday last week, lived 4 doors away from Cielo Drive on the same street. And I went over to Phil. I said, Phil, I need to use your telephone. They were, remember those phones used to pick up and
Oh yeah.
didn't have cell phones. I said, I need to call London. I said, I need to give them an update. I said, do you know who lives 2 doors away? He said to me, well, yes, Roman Polanski, the film director, and his wife, Sharon Tate. I said, are you sure? Phil said, yes. He said, there were helicopters here all morning. So by pure luck, again, pure chance, I got a scoop on the world when Phil told me that Sharon Tate was living in the house because I didn't know who'd been murdered. So that was my kickoff. And from then on, I followed the case with a passion because it was the most amazing, awful murder to end this in the 60s in a bloodbath. So, there's so much more one could say, but so from day one, I was on it. Then I followed up and I covered the trial and I saw Manson in court. And there was so much unfolding about the whole Manson case that was riveting.
Yeah. Let me ask you, you had the opportunity to interview some of the Manson family members.
I did.
But let me just talk about Charlie for just a second.
Yeah.
Obviously, he had the ability to manipulate people. He had to have some kind of charisma or aura about him, even if it was insanity, something that they attracted them to him. Tell me, what did you see when you saw Charlie Manson?
Well, what I saw was a definitely charismatic fellow. The guy was, he grew up in reform schools. He was a little punk of a guy, about 5'3". I'm 5'4.5", so I'm a giant. But he was in reform schools. He was in jails. And how does a young, puny-looking fellow survive with these 6'4" other cons? You become glib-tongued. You become able to enthrall them with dialogue. And he learned that in jail. Then he came out, and in the 60s, this was flower power, drugs, LSD. And Charlie realized he was able to manipulate people just by words and what he said. And that's how he got all the girls to join him, because he found troubled young women and he brought them to the Spahn movie ranch where they were living. And he was their daddy, their lover, their everything. And he fed them drugs when he felt they needed to take drugs. He didn't take drugs. He didn't take LSD. And along the way, he was a great manipulator. He was so brilliant at that. And again, when you look at him, and when I saw him in court, I thought, who is this guy? He looks like nothing, but he had this ability. Look, let me ask you a question. Some of the best cult leaders in our time are glib, smooth talking, clever. Do I lie?
No, you don't. We've done what's called a cult series on this podcast. Where we've analyzed guys like Jim Jones, Reverend Jim. Okay.
Yeah, Jonestown. Yeah.
Jonestown, and we're getting ready to do one on David Koresh down there in Waco.
Another one. But I'm sorry to throw this back at you, because now you, Pastor Paul, you're an expert. You have seen these and you've looked at them up close and personal. What is it about? I throw the question back to you. There's a common denominator. What is it?
Well, there's no question that all of them have a Messiah complex.
Okay.
Okay, and they make the audience feel like they're special, that they're something divine almost, and that if you follow them and listen to them and do the things that you would ask them to do, they would get closer to God or to you or to whatever. And I think that they all have that same charismatic, manipulating capability, yet make you think that you know that you want to do. They make you fall in love with them. I mean,
That's right.
it's quite an extraordinary, and I still see it today. I'm going to be honest. I'm a preacher, so I've been doing this.
Yes, of course. That's why. I mean, you are the perfect person to ask that question.
I got a little charisma myself, so I know it's part of the talent.
Yeah.
But I see people who misuse the talent, okay, and take advantage of people and use it to their advantage. And this is when it gets dangerous. I see it today. I see there's great actors, performers, preachers, motivational speakers. I mean, they're everywhere. So I just want to know, when you saw Charlie, is that what he possessed? Did he have that kind of?
Well, to be honest with you, when I saw this wimp of a guy, I mean, usually a pastor is good looking like you guys, but Charlie was kind of a wimpy guy, but he had such a smooth, oily tongue. He could make you believe that the world was flat.
A few of those too, so Ivor says that's fine. Bob, do you got some historical perspective to add to this? Because I mean, again, I read the book Helter Skelter. I didn't get to read your book, Five to Die, which now I will.
And Manson Exposed, his second one.
Okay. So give us some historical context to this whole Manson madness.
At the time that this was happening, again, Ivor was a first-person witness, so he was there on the scene. My thing is more of diving into documents and interviewing people who, I'm able to contact and are willing to talk. At that time, that MK Ultra program was bankrolled from the 50s to the tune of $10 million of money in that time.
Wow.
With inflation, you're talking about an awful lot of money. So when people say MK Ultra and they say tinfoil hat, I think that's a very good diversion to take away from what they were actually doing. They destroyed many people's lives. They would go in and experiment on prisoners, and we know Manson was incarcerated for half of his life. I don't mean to make a quantum leap and say that I know for sure they messed with him in prison, but also people in hospitals, soldiers, and other people, often without their consent, were dosed with drugs and different things to alter their personality. Ivor and I spoke about this, gentleman, so there's certain aspects that get so long we could go into on another show or something if you ever wanted to, but Jolyon West was at the University of Oklahoma and at UCLA, and documents came out in 2017 that showed Manson's history as a prisoner and different things about him that came out, and things about West were found by other journalists. And basically, West's documents, Jolyon West, showed that he had completed the ability to change someone's memory to alter their personality.
Wow.
And now he was dealing with a guy, Sidney Gottlieb, who ran MK Ultra. Now in public, of course, these guys who are in this field, they don't come out and say, this is what I do for a living.
Right.
I'll digress only so far as to say, when Jack Ruby was in custody for, killing Lee Harvey Oswald,
right,
someone went to see him, which is Jolyon West. He goes down to Dallas where Ruby's on trial. Ruby's in a, obviously he's incarcerated. He's up for murder, so he's tense, but he didn't have a psychic break. One day after seeing Jolyon West, after seeing West, he had a complete breakdown. Judge Joe Brown stopped the trial and said, investigate why this happened in a day. Ruby was never able to testify on his own behalf, which he was prepared to do. So as you guys know, I've looked into the JFK case. When I saw this stuff, I almost fainted. And just this week, I saw footage which is up on YouTube, and it is West actually speaking to the press on the news, and they're asking him what happened to Jack Ruby, and he said, well, he had a break, and he's, basically, I'm paraphrasing, insane, and no one insane should be tried for a crime. So these guys in this field, if I can make a quantum jump, if they do something dirty, they don't want to get into court, because anything can happen in a courtroom. They can't control it as well, even if they control the judge, which I'm not implying in this case. But in any event, he told them, that to the news, and he's there on the scene, and they didn't know about MK Ultra. So he was deep into this case. Where did he come from? And he was into the MK Ultra research at the time. So I'm just saying, it's not a tinfoil hat thing to wonder what's going on with some of these witnesses like Sirhan and him. And I don't want to go too far into a rabbit trail. So if you guys want to bring anything else up, just call on me. But let's go back to our main focus, Mr. Ivor Davis.
There we go.
Yeah, but Bob, we'll go back to that. I wanted to ask a little bit more about Charlie West from you as well. But yeah, we'll jump back to Ivor. I wanted to talk because we quickly gleaned over your book 5 to Die. So this was actually the first book that was written about this case. Now, as Bob was introducing us to you in your work, I actually had never heard of this book before. And if you look it up, I think, Pastor, you did on Amazon. I think because it's probably out of publication, it's like $1,400 on Amazon. It's like a collector's edition.
I thought I was going to buy it, and there must not be many left because it's $1,472 to buy the book.
Keep your money.
I sell Xerox copies for $20. Just kidding.
I was going to say, I'm going to go to the source, Ivor Davis, and see if Ivor's got another copy somewhere.
But I wanted to, because the book that got all the attention is I think it's the #1 best true crime story book of all time, is by Vincent Bugliosi, and Helter Skelter. But I think Ivor, your book 5 to Die kind of developed some of the framework for that book. Can you talk a little bit about that, if you would?
Well, I'll just give you the succinct summary of it. So my book 5 to Die came out literally just before the trial began, and I covered the trial, and in it I came up with all this stuff about anyway, so I mean, this kind of weaves into what I said earlier. Okay, so my book came out, and I covered the trial, and I discovered that Vincent Bugliosi theory to the jury that he presented. Vincent Bugliosi was a great, dedicated, passionate, obsessed man, and I was sitting in the courtroom when all of a sudden Vince did his opening statement, and he said, here's why Charlie Manson sent the girls out to kill. Because there was going to be a revolution, the Black Revolution, and they were going to come and wipe the country out. And therefore you and I and all of us have to escape to an underground city in the desert. And that's why Manson ordered the murders. Well, that was what was in my book, because I had done the book soon after the murders took place, and quoted many of his people. I mean, so all of a sudden I see what's in my book spouted by Vincent Bugliosi as the reason for the murders.
Wow.
I'm absolutely flabbergasted. And the punchline was, well, how does Charlie know this is the reason for Armageddon? The Beatles, in their White Album, Revolution, Helter Skelter, told Charlie they were secret messages to him. I mean, and then Vincent Bugliosi used that as a thesis of his case, and he got a conviction. I mean, it's just so outrageously ridiculous. And then years later, Aaron Stovitz, who was Vincent Bugliosi's, and nobody knows this much. Aaron Stovitz, who was Vincent Bugliosi's boss, had a loud mouth, and he got fired from the case. And Vincent Bugliosi came in as number one man. And Aaron Stovitz, the guy who was fired from the case, allowing Vincent to get in there, told me that Vincent had my book before the trial began, and it marked up pages about the Beatles made me do it, blah, 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 blah.
Wow.
I mean, believe me, at this particular stage in my career, I don't need any accolades, but that's the true story, and I'm going to leave it there.
Wow.
I mean, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's just crazy. So Vincent, let me get it right though for everybody as well. Vincent Bugliosi was the lead prosecutor in the Manson case, correct?
He was the second prosecutor until Aaron Stovitz said that Susan Atkins' performance on the witness stand was Sarah Bernhardt, and the judge fired Aaron. Aaron went off, and Vince moved into the number one spot. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So, but historically, if you look at the case, that's the only name you're going to hear about.
Yes, of course you are.
Bugliosi. Yeah. But it's just crazy to me that, his whole defense strategy was essentially reading your book and then presenting that as the case, and then that's how they ended up convicting everybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I say that to you today, you think, what a bloody egomaniac Ivor Davis is. What a loudmouth, whatever. But this is what happened. I mean, in 50 years later, or whenever it was, 69, 70. I mean, it's the facts, just the facts, man.
Yeah.
Ivor's one of the humblest people I ever met, and some of the things he did, he never mentioned to me, even across 15 interviews or something, and I just learned it when I read about him in different articles online that he was involved in all these different cases. So he's anything but self-aggrandizing. He's one of the most humble people I've ever met, considering his accomplishments.
And I just find it crazy, though, that the only thing you ever hear about is Vincent Bugliosi.
But let me tell you, Bugliosi was crazy, okay? Almost as crazy as Manson. Only in the passion for getting a conviction. Vincent slept in his office every bloody night. He never went home. His poor wife, and I knew Vincent in those days, his poor wife never saw him. During the trial, Vincent divorced his wife and stayed in the courthouse for 9 months. I mean, his passion for the case, and I got to give it to him, his passion for the case got the conviction, because he made a jury believe in this cockamamie thesis that the Beatles made them do it. I mean, anyway.
Wow. So you had to be covering the trial, sitting there listening to the prosecutor.
And I was flabbergasted. I thought, why is he?
He's using my book.
Yes. I mean, he's done it. Look, what am I going to do? Jump up and say, but that's in my book? No, of course, I was a young journalist.
Yeah.
And then we have the Beatles back in the picture. And I mean, I knew the Beatles. I knew that they didn't send Charlie Manson messages telling him to send the guys out to kill. I knew that.
Right.
Because 5 years earlier, I'd been traveling with them. The Beatles didn't do that. You ask John Lennon, you can't ask John Lennon. Ask Ringo about it today. He says it's the biggest load of, I mean, John Lennon told me when I discussed that with him years later.
Yeah.
He said, well, anyway, he denied it. And I won't tell you what he said because it's a bit obscene.
I'd like to throw one thing in about Bugliosi was that, in some, I was reading someone else's research, but it was, his milkman was Herbert Weissel, and he actually was accused of, by Bugliosi, fathering one of his children. And he used the power of I believe the FBI to investigate him, and basically was stalking him. Picked up one of his children, I think coming out of school, and took him to a toy store without permission. And that case was before this case happened. And when that came out, Weissel, sued him for a small amount of money. He wasn't in it for the money. He wanted to get him off his tail. It's kind of a frightening, I guess, to have a DA coming after you with these things going on. So I
Right.
think it shows the state of mind of Bugliosi. He was quite paranoid and misusing his power. Of course, being in that situation, if it was your family, I could understand anyone being upset. But he was kind of compromised by this coming out when he was picked for this case.
Mm.
And just to add quickly, later, he wrote one of the worst books on the Kennedy assassination ever written. It weighs about 400 pounds. And if you've even done a cursory study of facts and not things that are gleaned by making quantum leaps into, the unknown, his book was horrible. And his initial reaction to the assassinations was, if anybody believes like the Robert Kennedy case is the way they stated it, they're crazy. Vehemently, he went through this. Then he did a 360 and he came out attacking the assassinations when they were being called into question. More recently, before his passing, he did this huge book. If you weigh it, you couldn't mail it to somebody. It would cost too much money. So he was a strange character and he had some strange things in his background, but people of note have said that he should have been disqualified and fired for the case with the milkman. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Wow.
I wanted to shift a little bit, but still on the Manson topic here. Ivor, I don't know when this happened. If there was during the case, after the case, you can give us a timeline. But you received personal threats towards your family from one of the Manson girls, one of the original members, Squeaky Fromm. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Well, don't forget, I had written the first book on Manson. And of course, the girls knew it. They had seen the book. And the first day I showed up in the Hall of Justice for the trial, the girls were standing outside the courtroom. They were not involved in the Sharon Tate murder, so they were not arrested. And as you may know, if you look back in the history record, every single day during the trial, the Manson devotees sat outside the courtroom, so much so that after about 2 months, they shaved their heads, they painted swastikas on their forehead because Charlie did it. And what Charlie did, they did. So, so the first or second day I walked in there and Squeaky, she'd like to be called Frommy, although it sounds like it's from. Squeaky turned to me and said, she didn't, it wasn't a direct threat. She said to me, Ivor, because she knew who I was by then, she said, do you know what it feels like to have a sharp knife stuck down your throat? Well, I took that as a threat.
Right.
And I basically, we were living in Malibu at the time. I called my wife and I said, take my daughter and move out of the house because there's a lot of gang members who want to get revenge. And my wife, my late wife, took my daughter to Los Angeles. And for 2 weeks, they lived with some friends until the heat went down. So that's my story.
Wow. There you have it. Amen. So I want to throw in now, if it's all right, Paul, the fact that let's go from Manson to a murder next door. Ivor, you have a knack for being at the right place at the right time, maybe the wrong place at the wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one that would be, but you had this incredible knack to be somewhere when something historical was taking place. And to find out that your neighbor,
yes,
serial killer. Can you tell us a little bit about him and your relationship with him and what happened?
Okay. In the 70s, I moved out of Los Angeles to a house in Malibu, and we lived in Malibu. And I was a soccer coach to my son's team. And one day, Fred Rayler came to me and introduced himself and said, and I knew who he was because he was a good-looking guy. He looked like a movie star. And he said to me, my my son Douglas, my stepson Douglas, is in your team, and I don't know anything about soccer, but I'd like to be your assistant coach so I can get close to my stepson. I could understand my stepson. We can be friends. And I said, I mean, if anybody comes to you with a story like that, you know, you're going to weep. You're going to say, of course, if you're a decent human being, and I reckon I am. And so I said, Fred, join us. And Fred was a great coach. And Fred didn't know anything about soccer. We won the title for our kids team. My son, his son, Douglas, my son Gideon, who's now a handsome man in his 50s today. And I was thrilled with Fred, and we became friends. And I went to the kids' birthday parties. They came to my kids' birthday parties. And then I moved out of Malibu. And then a year later, I pick up the paper and discover Fred Rayler has been arrested for the murder after a terrible accident in which his son, his stepson, and his wife had died at Santa Cruz Island. Well, you know, we're all, I mean, what would happen to you if you discovered a good friend and his son and his second wife had died in a terrible boating accident? So I went down there, I went to the funeral. You know, we what can you say to somebody who's lost their wife and their stepson? About 3 months after the terrible accident, I pick up the newspaper. I'm not living in Malibu. I pick up the newspaper, and on the front page it says, Fred Rayler arrested for the murder of Douglas, that young boy who's my son's age,
Wow.
and Verna, his second wife.
Oh,
And
no.
I can't believe it. And then they say the reason Fred was arrested was that he'd taken out, are you ready for this? He was going on a boat trip with his second wife and with his stepson. He took out a total of $820,000 life insurance.
Mm.
And that rang a few bells.
Right.
And
Yep.
then we all realized that Fred's first wife, Jean, had died in the water in the swimming pool by accident. So here's a guy that loses two wives to two water accidents. But still, I believed in him.
Right.
Went to see him. I said, what can I do? He said, you can't do much because they're going to find me innocent and I'm going to be a free man. And I went to Fred's trial for nearly a year. And I testified what a great guy he was. And then he was convicted. And I was stunned. And then they called me as a witness to say what a great guy he was. And I stood up and I still didn't believe he was guilty. And I stood up and I said what a great guy he was. You know, I told the story that I just told you, a wonderful story about a caring father who had this tragedy in his life. And then Fred said to me, he went on trial, he was convicted. And then Fred called me from his prison cell and said, Ivor, do the book about me, would you? Because I talked to him about doing a book about his life. And he said, wait until the trial is over because they're going to acquit me. Anyway, so I visit his hometown and I find out that his parents, and particularly his father, has a history of insurance cons.
Wow.
Oh, no.
I mean, like father and son. I hate to say this with a father and son there.
Right.
The father, Fred, his name was Fred. No, his father's name was, I forget it was. Anyway, Mr. Rayler Sr. had insurance claims on a burnt boat, a burnt car, 3 or 4 other ones. And then 10 years later, I looked into Fred Rayler's history and I discovered that Fred Rayler had claimed on a burnt boat, a burnt car, a burnt guest house. And the moment I read that, the hairs on the back, it's the aha moment. You've heard of that.
Right.
The moment I heard that, I knew Fred was guilty. And then I went back and I used to visit him in Folsom Prison. And when I went back, I said, Fred, you know, everybody you sent me to talk to in your hometown in Indiana had different things to say.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you know, they didn't quite agree that you were and your family were the perfect family. And Fred said, I want you to tell me or give me a transcript of everybody you interviewed. And I said, Fred, I can't do that as a journalist. I gave them the promise that I would talk to them confidentially, and I
Right.
can't do that. And Fred said, don't visit me anymore. Cut off all communication with me. And to this very day, until my book came out, I've not heard from him.
Hmm.
And, you know, he's still in the prison. He's not in Folsom, he's in California. And I'm sure, you know, when my new book called, you know, the Devil in My Friend came out, Fred said to me, before you print it, Ivor, and he's in prison, he's convicted of first-degree murder. He said, I want you to send me an advance copy so I can make sure that the facts in this murder book, alleged murder book, are accurate. And my publisher said, don't do that. And that's where we are today. I mean, I'd probably given you a rather ragged version of it, but there's a lot to talk about, and that's the near and dear to me book that I just brought out. Fred is still in prison. I haven't heard from him lately, and he still pleads innocence.
Wow. And
What-
I just wanted to get this correct for anybody listening right now, as I was just looking this up on IvorDavisBooks.com. The book that you're referring to that you wrote is The Devil in My Friend, or is it The Malibu Murders?
No, The Devil in My Friend, the inside story of a Malibu murder. The Devil
Okay.
in My Friend is the name of the book. The inside story of a Malibu murder is the subtext of it.
Okay.
The Devil in My Friend is the book title. And it's had great reviews, etc., etc. And that's my current book. And once I get over this, I'm going to do a story about my adventures in Hollywood, which is a lot more fun than murder.
Let me ask you one question. We're from Indiana. Paul and I are.
Okay.
So what town do you remember?
Richmond, Indiana.
Yeah, I know. Right.
know
Yeah, it's on the east side of near Ohio. It's east side of Indiana. Yeah.
Exactly. And I must, if you give me an address, I will send you the book, or you can buy it, whichever you like. And it's because it is on sale on Amazon and all these other places. And it is a absolutely fascinating story that, you know, I mean, it began 50 years ago, like the Beatles. I mean, more than 50 years ago, and there it is in the year 2025. We're talking about it.
Right.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And that had to be shocking to you. It had to have been the initially shocking. One thing you hear about the accident. Second thing you hear about him being arrested.
Yeah.
You don't believe it. You stand at the guy, and then you find out his father involved in these things. And then you go back and look at his history, and you see he did the same things before he killed his first wife, which I'm allegedly saying he killed his first wife.
Well, look, but he never got convicted or even charged with. It was an accident. It was an accident of drowning in the swimming pool.
I realize that. We'll say that. We'll say it was an accident. Very, very allegedly.
Please do.
I'll leave it
knowing Fred is now in jail in California, and he probably will listen to this show.
All right.
So if you're listening, Fred, I'm sorry. I don't believe you're innocent.
I don't think so. I mean, the apple don't fall far from the tree, and this one is a bushel of them right underneath the base of it. So, yeah, I mean, really an extraordinary story for a man who has an extraordinary career in reporting to absolutely and a knack. And I don't know if you can what to do with that, except that some people have that. I don't know if it's just the way God arranged your career to always have you in the right place at the right time. But this is a fascinating story.
Well, you know something. I want to tell you this. I'm an old man now, and God may have had something to do with this, because
How does
Yeah.
that happen? Right.
Well, if Fred ever gets out on parole, I'm glad my picture isn't up there with you three handsome.
I see that. Now I know why.
Yeah.
Fred, just stay right where you're at, okay? All right.
Well, so I wanted, I don't know if it's the right time to do this, but I had this question I really wanted to ask. And I want both your gentlemen's take on it. But I think Bob, you might have more knowledge on the subject, but I was curious what Ivor was going to say too. Um, the episode that we did, I don't know if you guys had a chance to listen to it with Manson Exposed. We got into a little bit of Tom O'Neill's book Chaos and this potential CIA link with Jolly West and Manson. And I think that the one thing that Tom O'Neill was never able to do, which was interesting, was to put Jolly West and Manson in the same room, which was part of his big over 20-year research investigation. I wanted to see, Bob, if you had any other information on that. I know you alluded to some publications from 2017.
Well, my good friend Ivor and I have spoken about this privately. And, Ivor was there. So, I always like to mention that he was involved in this. It involved his family. He was threatened. He had to put them into hiding. And he's been a very good friend to me by sharing things with me and bringing people into my sphere who I couldn't have spoken to without him. So all kudos to him. But my thing is looking at it through the research, through documents. I wasn't there. I didn't see, these things happen.
Right.
That being said, they don't have to have been in the same room. They were both at the Haight-Ashbury Clinic for free medical treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Manson's parole officer picked him up in LA and basically moved with him. He went from 40 some odd approximate cases down to only Manson. So at the same time, West had affiliation with that clinic. So did Roger Smith, his parole officer. They say that the head of the clinic said that all the documents disappeared right after the Tate LaBianca murders that had to do with research on giving people high doses of amphetamines and other drugs. So West's MO was he would set up safe houses, which you guys know what it is, but for someone listening, it's like setting up a house down in this district where there were grad students at Berkeley and different places. And he would put them in the house and provide them with drugs and free rent. And he would watch what happened and monitor their behavior. But basically, about 7 months before the murders, Operation Chaos and a COINTELPRO had come into play to try to discredit the anti-war movement and go after the hippie movement to make it darker, because it first started off as sort of a folksy, folk music kind of crowd of people who just didn't want to see people killed. It turned into something very dark. Now you could say, okay, Bob, you're making, or I would say, Bob, you're making a quantum leap here. But in this one, he calls me back. But his mission for MK Ultra, which is in documents, was to brainwash people and get them to do things they ordinarily morally wouldn't do and have no remorse about it. So they're both at the same clinic. They're both, he goes down to working with Manson. Manson's in the clinic with his people, but he's the focus of it. They're going down with him. And then his parole officer is there who goes down to only his case. And lo and behold, Charlie is getting people to do whatever he wants them to do. Now, Ivor would point out to me, Bob, he wasn't James Bond. I don't think he was. I mean, West was crazy. He, poisoned an elephant with LSD. But his job was to create behavior control. And if you look at these people, were they, following a script and they were normal people? No, they were everyday people who were vulnerable, who he got a hold of. Right. So when I first saw documents to this, I was shocked because I believed it to be true. And it linked into the RFK case and such, and the JFK case with what I described before.
Right.
So this is serious business. It's a serious allegation that's often dismissed out of hand. Now, I'm not saying Ivor dismisses it out of hand. He's smarter than I, with certainly more life experience. But I'd just like to add, before we kick it over to Ivor, was, Bugliosi was one, you don't want these people out of jail. I mean, they killed people. They're a mess. Some of them got paroled later after their lives changed, after many years in prison. So in other words, no citizen wants to see these people on the street. That said, Bugliosi, we looked a little bit into the milkman situation. He seems to have been compromised to some degree. Then the prosecutor in the case was a well-spoken gentleman named Stephen Kay, who always toted the company line. Now, he worked with Bugliosi under him as a prosecutor. Now, he said if he saw documents that came out in 2017, that he was convinced that there was nothing to this. And now, in general, in the case, he had come out and said that he thinks differently about the whole case now with this light being shed. He thinks completely differently. He came out and said that on film. Now, he watered it down a bit in public, but he never refuted it. So I'm just saying it's very odd that they would both be in that same clinic in Haight-Ashbury.
Sure.
And that he didn't have to talk to Manson. He just, could have given the instructions and the drugs to Roger Smith, who just provided them with what they needed. So nobody was James Bond. These were vagabond people, but that's never been looked into. And you're talking about, I kind of looked it up as after I said it was 10 million, the money came out, they spent on that program 87 and change $1 million on mind control. Now you look at all the killers coming out today. I'm not saying every one of them is mind controlled, but you have to ask yourself in some of these cases, what's going on? I don't think the way to go about that is to dismiss it out of hand. They don't just drop $87 million on nothing. So with that, I go over to the wiser, more experienced first person account of Mr. Ivor Davis.
Yeah, I guess to follow that up though, Ivor, what's your perspective on all of?
Well, let me keep this very short.
Okay.
Bob and I have talked about this, and we are completely opposite ends of the pole. And I don't want to get in too much detail. The one thing I do agree with is that the CIA did do dirty tricks with drugs and people at that era. Now, I happen to have spoken to Diane, who was one of Manson's young followers. I did this after talking to Bob a few days ago. And she said, number one, when we lived in San Francisco, we did not meet Jolyon West because we all stayed in our bus every day. Okay. As I say, Bob and I can go on and on and on about that. Now, I also spoke to Stephen Kay, and he had no knowledge of that, even though Bob has just said differently. So, as I say, I don't want to go into this rabbit warren because Bob knows I disagree with some of what he says. There are morsels of truth, and I think we could go on, we could dance all night. So I'm going to end it there. Thank you.
Well, I just like to add one caveat. Kay wasn't commenting on West and Roger Smith. He was commenting on other aspects of the case that came out in documents. So he had nothing to do with saying, did West meet Smith, and was that how they were led? There was other
I mean, Bob, I
I
spoke to Stephen Kay in the last 72 hours. I spoke to Diane, the Manson girl, in the last 72 hours because I knew we were going to try and thrash this out. But I leave it this way. Bob has your opinion, and I have my opinion, and maybe never the twain shall meet.
And I would just say Kay did say those things, not to contradict Ivor, but Kay did say those things on film, that had he seen these documents, he said the case wouldn't have been one that he questions what happened, and now publicly he's gone softer. But it wasn't that they were testifying at the time. Were they at the clinic, and were they seeing those two people? That's documented.
All right. Well, that has a lot to. It's still the CIA question, the MK Ultra agenda still still has to be looked at today. I think when you look at the shooters today that are in the school shooters or significant shooters that have done things, you start asking yourself, were they also given some type of CIA training? Maybe not, but
Right.
it is $87 million. But I'll go with Ivor's fact that he talked to the people directly in the last 72 hours. That trumps a lot right there. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll throw it out there, Bob.
Well, when we did speak to Diane on a show, like Ivor has a different memory of it, but on a break, I asked her, were they in the same, when you went with, did you go with Charlie to his parole hearings? And she said, yes. And then I said, where did they meet? And Ivor had said, if it's a big office building, they could have never run into each other. But she said they met in a house. Now, we were both on the line when that happened, and I'm pretty certain that's what she said to me because I almost fainted. Ivor remembers it differently. So, and we're friends. So, Ivor's been great. But, we leave it there. But he invested more than I with what he went through with his family going into this. But I've spent a lot of time investigating it. So we're both very passionate, and he with more reason than I. So I just thank him for all the times he's put witnesses in my path and helped me out and be very kind to me. A nicer man I have not met.
Absolutely.
That's nice.
I don't think there's a better way to have said that. And you see, that's how you agree to disagree on certain things.
If only we could get you guys in Washington to teach both Republican and Democrats how to have a much better country, wouldn't we?
Yes, yeah.
Oh man.
But I think chasing things like that are interesting regardless, and especially if you have Ivor who's lived through so many things which we've covered today already. Just taking his perspective and life experience on that stuff it's invaluable. I mean, not everybody is blessed enough to still be around as long as you have been, Ivor. So we sincerely appreciate you coming on and talking about these things with us. But I wanted to ask this because I was getting lost in your website over here, and I wanted to know if I went through, I guess I forgot, an anthology, which I guess would be a good term for some of the things we've covered, of the books that you've written. Where would you start me at and run me through them? I don't want to do them in timeline order unless that's the right way to do it.
My books?
Yes.
My first book was in 1970, Five to Die. And then, the trouble is I've done, and then, I can't even remember whether I did a book in between. Then I did a Manson book about 2017, which updated everything. And then we're talking about the Manson case, and that's the last book I've done. Now last year I came out with my new updated The Beatles and Me on Tour 60th anniversary edition, which came out last year. And then shortly after, that book came out in May or June of last year, was The Devil in My Friend, which has got nothing to do with Manson or with the Beatles. So, I've hip hopped around all over the place. And when you ask me that question, I must say I have to sit down and think about it because my instant recall is not as good as it used to be. Or as the great English songwriter Lionel Bart used to say, things ain't what they used to be. And I agree with him because at my age, I'm taking stock. But stay tuned for my book next year, which is about my adventures with Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, Muhammad Ali, you name it.
All right. So you are going to come out with another book next year?
Next year, yeah. Definitely next year. I was going to bring it out this year, but forget it. But this is my whole career of Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah.
Over a period of, and some of them are great. And I don't want to start promoting my book now because it hasn't come out yet, but it's almost written. And once I get down from 50 adventures down to 20 adventures, who to leave out? Do I leave Arnold Schwarzenegger out? Do I leave Elizabeth Taylor out? Muhammad Ali?
No. The answer is no, no, and no.
No, and no. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a picture, of God on the wall there.
I see that. Richard Byrne. Yeah.
Yeah, and can you see that?
Yeah, we see
Yeah.
it.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about my interview with God because I interviewed George Burns. What a great movie. I mean, you're too young to remember that, Paul Jr., but I don't know whether Pastor Paul remembers.
I remember it. I do.
And he's a very funny guy.
Yeah, he was incredible.
He was, yeah. And as I say, I could show you some pictures.
Show us some. Go ahead.
Yeah,
So I'm just going to tell you. Let's see. Walk around. So do you know who that guy is? Wait a minute.
Wait. Oh, that's the no. Who is that? Is that
who's driving me in the Rolls Royce?
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali?
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
Oh, wow. So you're riding along with Muhammad Ali in a Rolls Royce.
And my chauffeur, yeah.
Wow.
And then we have one here.
Oh, that's Abbey.
That took me in his private jet. What?
Well, who's the other guy? Who's the other guy?
That?
Sammy.
The guy with the cigarette is Sammy Davis Jr.
yes,
Right.
And I'm going to show you one more, and then we'll call it quits because this is called The King and I. I don't know if you can see it. I'll get my hands out the way.
The King and I. Is
now
that
you see the
King
guy
Charles?
holding his finger on his chin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who
That's
is
Charles.
that?
That's
King Charles. Yeah, King Charles
King
III.
Charles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, when he's young.
When I traveled with him. And here's a guy that waited 50 years to take the job because his mother hung on to the job until
he hung on for quite a while. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway,
today it's ironic that that as we're taping this, that President Donald Trump is in
right this week.
Yes, right
and
now.
And Paul, who is taking him around Windsor Castle?
King Charles.
King Charles III.
Good. Yeah, there he is.
Wall, yeah.
Yeah. You have
you can't make it up.
No, you can't. Incredible life. Ivor Davis, incredible life and incredible researcher. Also, Bob Wilson.
Thank you.
Today.
Bob is an incredible researcher. We are great friends, but we differ on certain topics.
That's why
we agree on many others.
That's how it makes you good friends.
Yes.
Because if you agreed on everything, you wouldn't be great friends. Okay. That's just the way it is.
Yes. And by the way, Bob wrote a terrific book about Paul McCartney. And did you ever tell Paul and Pastor Paul?
I believe he was in the book. He was interviewed for the book, I think.
Yes, I was interviewed for the
book. You were? Okay, then I did read the book. I haven't read it since it came out a few years ago. But that's a great book.
Yep.
It
was dedicated to Ivor and two other friends.
Okay.
And
it goes into the Paul is dead theory.
Well, we said he wasn't dead because as soon as people see that, they say, "Oh my God, now this guy's going to tell us Paul McCartney was killed."
All right, I'm going to finish. I'm going to finish with one note. I get a call yesterday from Bob Eubanks, who put the first Beatles show at the Hollywood Bowl on in 1964. Okay. So Bob says to me, "Can you call Paul? He's going to appear at the Santa Barbara Bowl in later in October, because I'd like to go up and introduce him." I said, "Bob Eubanks, you're the guy that put the Hollywood Bowl on." I said, "But I'll check out." So I check it out and I discover that. And this note, a question for you guys. There were 2 front row seats if you wanted to buy them left. And I wondered if you could tell me what a seat for Paul McCartney costs today.
Today for front row?
Front row.
Slightly more than the MK Ultra budget.
Oh,
yes.
Oh my Lord.
Take a guess.
I'm going to say
$4,000.
How much you say, Bob?
4,000.
Okay, I was going to say 5,000.
No, it's actually the cheapest seats are just under $3,000 each in the front row.
Whoa.
But if you want to stand, you only have to pay $1,000.
Okay. Okay. Do
Well-
you still talk to Paul McCartney? Do you still have opportunity to talk?
No, I tell you what the situation is. People call me up with songs and they say, I've got a song here which is perfect for them. How do you do it? And I say, look, I don't have communication. First of all, Paul is untouchable, although I did talk to Ringo last week. But Ringo is promoting his Las Vegas, his trip. But Ringo is in a different category to Paul, although they're both great
Right.
guys.
Right.
And by the way, do you know how old Ringo is now?
No. How old is Ringo now?
Take a guess.
84.
I was going to say 85.
85, right.
85.
Right.
He
Wow.
turned 85 in July.
Wow.
So, I mean, Paul is in his own stratosphere. That's why he can charge those ridiculously high ticket prices.
Right.
But I think I will stay home that week and play one of his records, one of his new records, because he is an incredible merchandiser as well as being an incredible talent. So
Yeah.
I think, we seem to have covered the waterfront.
Yeah. I think
All right. I can close it out here. So I just wanted to say, Ivor, Bob, thanks so much for joining us today. Ivor, your career has given us a front row seat to history, and I sincerely mean that. From the Beatles to the Manson murders to stories that continue to shock and teach us today. And Bob, thank you for lending your research and perspective to deepen this conversation. For our listeners, be sure to check out Ivor's books on ivordavisbooks.com, especially Manson Exposed. And it seems like this one is catching my interest maybe the most. Maybe I'll start with this, The Devil and My Friend. Gentlemen, it's been an honor, and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Been a pleasure. And one quick question for Paul Jr.
Yes.
I love the decor in your studio. Can you send me the name of your architecture, your designer? I love it.
It's a green screen.
it's a green screen.
Oh my
Not
God.
even real.
And I thought,
Ivor, they live in a different virtual world than you and me. Okay.
okay.
If I remove this, you'd be like, why is there a laundry basket behind you?
Gentlemen, it's been fun. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Stay well.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you guys so
God
much.
bless. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the Paul Begley Podcast. New episodes will be released every Tuesday on all major podcast streaming platforms. For a video recording of this episode, you can watch and subscribe on our YouTube channel at Paul Begley Podcast. Hey, guys, we want you to connect with us. Follow us on X and Twitter at Paul Begley Pod. We'd love to hear your questions you want us to answer on the show. For additional Paul Begley content, go to our website at paulbegleyprophecy.org. If you've thought about it, we'll talk about it. Paul Begley Podcast.